Thank you for inviting me to your conference. Like all of you, I'm indebted to John Friesen for endowing it. The Elizabethan philosopher Bacon said, conference between good men is but knowledge in the making. Not currently politically correct, perhaps, but the point is valid. I'm here to talk about loneliness and autonomous vehicles and the senior community. There is a reason that solitary confinement is the worst punishment that a prison system can hand out. Deprived of the stimulation of human contact, despair, madness in the classical sense, and loss of the will to live is predictable. But that's exactly what we do to a senior whose ability to drive is taken away by infirmity or failure of eyesight or by statute. No longer to join companions for lunch or shows, unable to shop for herself without extreme effort, she is condemned to solitary confinement in her cottage or high-rise. The situation is worse in our auto-dependent suburbs, which make shopping, access to services, or entertainment utterly dependent on cars. In the center city, buses help, but getting on and off a bus with its steep stairs, crowded in with strangers, is an ordeal aging hips and knees can't look forward to. The crowds and smell are intimidating, even with a mild degree of dementia. The bus stop is never exactly where she wants to go, so she has to walk alone, often in the dark, and in the winter, with the threat of icy sidewalks causing a hip fracture with its life-shortening consequences. But first, two caveats. The first is when Dean Gutman and I first discussed this topic in early February, it was leading, if not bleeding edge, in discussions of social impact. Now autonomous vehicles are a popular topic in the general press. The Conference Board of Canada has held an all-day seminar on the subject. The March 2016 edition of Esquire had 5 pages on the subject. April 2016 Wired magazine published a study on the redesign of cities to cope with autonomous vehicles. May 2016 Consumer Reports has an article on the subject. As both Esquire and Consumer Reports draw on interviews and visits to Stanford or Google, I suspect a PR push by one or more of the players in the AV universe to create a political favorable climate. And on it goes. The Economist of London has kept a watchful eye on the subject. EY, the consulting arm of one of the big four accounting firms, Ernst & Young, published a study of the impact of AVs on the auto insurance industry. The second caveat is that this presentation was pre-recorded on the 22nd of April. On the 18th of April, Beverly Hills, California authorized a major study for the use of autonomous vehicles as a supplement to its municipal bus system. There could be further developments in the rollout of autonomous vehicles by the time this is displayed that could make this discussion seem hopelessly dated. Now, how did I come to the study of autonomous vehicles? I was chairing a committee on policy changes in a major national political party. I became concerned about the risk of pouring stimulus funds into masses of concrete for freeways which might never be utilized, as the technology could at least double freeway capacity and change land use patterns. There is no point in sterilizing thousands of acres of land and disfiguring communities if the freeways aren't fully used. The blight could be good for centuries. Now, what are autonomous vehicles, or AVs? They are vehicles that drive themselves with no driver or human intervention. How would they be used? Supposing a senior is living alone in a high-rise apartment. She wishes to go shopping, join friends for lunch, and be home before supper. Or perhaps she wishes to go out in the evening to a movie with friends and have tea or a drink with them before coming home. She summons an autonomous vehicle with her smartphone. It picks her up from her apartment building, takes her to the boutique, and disappears. After lunch, the smartphone summons an autonomous vehicle to take her directly from the restaurant to her apartment building. The chances of becoming clinically depressed are substantially reduced. With the freedom provided by mobility, she can stay engaged with friends, family, and her community. Losing a driver's license by reason of infirmity or poor eyesight is no longer a major tragedy. The costs of the public health system are sharply reduced. She is in her own home. Even if she needs help with medication from a public health nurse or keeping her apartment clean and tidy with the assistance of a visiting cleaner, the cost will be orders of magnitude lower than a care facility with its uneven standards and limited chances to be outside. She can choose her own company and places to visit. Quality of life is enhanced and public costs are reduced. Now, how far away is this nirvana? One of the wild cards is hacking into the extra-vehicle communication, thus causing havoc. One demonstration last year involved a Jeep Cherokee being hijacked by, in effect, a laptop and a cell phone. This was a shadow only, as all the major players are aware of the issue and are no doubt working on it. But widespread use will require major assurances. To illustrate the point, it's been stated, not by Mercedes, but by a senior automotive journalist, that a Mercedes S500 now has more lines of code in it than a Boeing 787. The opposition to change will come from sectors of the economy with a lot to lose. The automobile insurance industry is the first opponent of note. With the much higher standards of safety, which I'll discuss later, auto insurance premiums will be sharply reduced. The plaintiffs' lawyers who are influential in American politics will see their income as a group reduced. The defense lawyers whose predictable buildings help sustain the large law firms will make common cause with the plaintiffs' bar. The insurance companies will not suffer a substantial diminution in premium income willingly. Recall that during the first Clinton presidency, plans for universal health insurance proposed by Bill and Hillary were frustrated by a coalition of insurers who spent millions on advertising and lobbying to prevent it coming into force. Even Obamacare still has its vociferous and well-bankrolled opponents. Local insurance agents who are active in local politics will not be pleased with the loss of auto insurance premium incomes. State and provincial politicians will be upset by a decreased demand for roads, as highway contractors have long been substantial contributors to politicians' campaigns. If ownership of car patterns change, as I predict, local car dealers will be vigorous opponents of any change in use. The ferocious campaign by car dealers in the States to prevent Tesla from rolling out its sales effort, which relies on company stores, is a good example. But with electric cars having much reduced demand for servicing, car dealers may face extinction, as the real profits are in their repair shops, not in their sales. Note that autonomous and electric vehicles are not the same. However, the technologies are arriving together. Nevertheless, change is coming. About 3 years ago, Mercedes forecast that if only 30% of the cars on a freeway were autonomous, the capacity of the freeway would be raised by 50%. The state of Victoria, Australia, in its Research Institute report last year, forecast that at a 50% level of autonomous vehicles on a freeway, the capacity of the freeway would be doubled. Napoleon is said to have remarked that God is on the side of the big battalions. The battalions on the side of change are big. General Motors, for instance, has put $500 million into Lyft, a competitor to the better-known Uber, the provider of taxi services in many places. It's one short step from providing taxi services with major software in back of the service to providing the same service without drivers. Google is the world's most valuable software firm with huge cash reserves. It released earnings yesterday. It made $3.54 billion in the quarter after setting aside about $850 million for its experimental ventures, which include the self-driving cars. It's racked up over 4 million miles, principally on the roads in and around Palo Alto, California, which includes a section of the highly congested 405 freeway. It has had 5 accidents, all minor, only one of which was its fault, and received 1 traffic ticket for driving too slow. This is substantially better than the performance of an alert and competent human driver for equivalent mileage. No wonder insurers are alarmed. Premiums will melt. Mercedes will roll out autonomous heavy trucks in Germany and Nevada this fall. Volvo, a Chinese-owned firm, last year demonstrated the ability of one of its cars to arrive at a restaurant on Santa Monica Boulevard discharge its passengers, and drive off with no human on board, park itself nearby, and return to pick up its passengers when summoned by a smartphone. Tesla now has as an option a self-parking ability whereby the car will park itself unaided in very tight parking spaces and emerge when called. The operator must be within 10 meters of the car. Now here is where we leave engineering and rejoin sociology with its imprecision. Inertia is a fact in human institutions and habits, but profit is no respecter of inertia. Institutional practices are changing quickly. The U.S. federal government has issued an opinion of the Chief Counsel of the National Highway Administration that providing the proponents of autonomous vehicles can show that they are at least as safe as vehicles operated by an alert and competent driver, there is no reason why they cannot be operated on public roads. Enter Google. The UK government has announced that no statute changes will be needed to introduce autonomous vehicles, that certain regulations would have to be amended. Quote, fine-tuning, unquote, was the phrase the Minister of Transportation used. 32 states in the U.S. have published regulations or considered draft legislation in the field. Several, including California, have bills that are through or very nearly through the legislative process. Singapore, which has a very dense traffic problem, has announced it has approved trials of autonomous taxis commencing this September. Canada is officially quiet. Human inertia is a factor. People don't like changing habits. According to Stats Canada, 77% of male seniors able to drive own automobiles and like using them. The figures for women are somewhat lower. Many of the houses, if not most, that seniors own have garages. The incentive for change is reduced. However, as seniors downsize to realize the gains locked into their houses, the 400 square feet or so set aside for driveways and garages may impact their choices on what to do next. No longer do almost all teenagers obtain a driver's license as soon as they are legally able. Younger people who live in city centers don't want to own a car. They rent a car of an appropriate size for what they want to do by the hour or half day. Evo, or its competitors, do well in the city but don't flourish in the suburbs. The economics are compelling. No longer do city or suburban dwellers need to own a car. No monthly parking or its equivalent in wasted space. No insurance on a machine that's idle roughly 97% of its life. No periodic maintenance charges. The savings mount up rapidly, even without depreciation, which shows up at resale time. Instead, charges only for periodic short-term use. As individual ownership subsides, the fleet owners, leasing companies, or more likely consortia of banks, manufacturers, and or the software industry integrators or technology companies emerge as the providers. As the industry consolidates, competition is lessened, as few organizations will be able or be willing to risk the large front-end costs to provide the autonomous vehicles requirements. The profits will be enormous. Who loses? Car dealers, insurance agents, plaintiffs' lawyers. Not much public sympathy there. There are partway solutions coming to market. Self-driving cars are like planes with autopilots. The driver can automate himself with a fair degree of safety, but take control when necessary or desirable. By 2020, these cars have been promised by Nissan, Renault, and Mercedes. Ford and Toyota are already offering self-parking, lane alert to prevent inadvertent change of lanes, and a standby system that will automatically brake a car as hard as necessary if collision is imminent. The industry consensus seems to be that self-driving comes in around 2020 and autonomous vehicles within a decade or two thereafter. Seniors as a group are major winners. No longer will they be confined to their apartments or cottages when driving is no longer an option. They will have at their disposal the equivalent mobility. With no human drivers and no fixed vehicle charges, the use of autonomous vehicles will be a major liberating technology. I hope this has been a bit of a window into a structure that most of you didn't even know was being built. I'll be delighted to answer questions if you'll email me at the address provided by the website for this conference, and I'll do my best to answer when I get back from France. Thank you.